Richard, you really cover the gamut, and you've done research. You've worked for NASA. How can we push the hidden hand towards disclosure or something along those lines?
Well, first of all, it's nice speaking in a small room. I haven't done something like this since off-Broadway, off-Broadway plays. How we get control goes to the heart of the political process. And I think Lynn put his finger on it. The internet is the key. We have to, at all costs, keep the internet free. We must keep it democratized. We must keep it multilateral, multicultural, international, as diverse, with as many sources as possible. I know for editors and people who have been in the mainstream news business, like I have at CBS, that this is kind of like a horror story, because editors don't want to see uncontrolled stories. And when you use the internet, you really have to be there. You have to think. You have to understand the process of cross-correlating not only different sources, but total BS, deliberate disinformation, people who are nuts. You know, I have often said the internet has given voices to people who should never have voices. And you have to wade through all of that. That's the downside. The upside is that Linda and I and you and you and you and Robin all have voices now that we could never have had with the limited resources that we can marshal to pursue the truth. And I often think about the story that Roswell was really the beginnings of the infusion of the solid state technologies which made the internet possible. And I'm wondering if at some interesting arcane level, some group of ETs or aliens realized that the one way they could undermine the idea of unified master dictatorial control was to seed a technology that would ultimately give us all voices to where ultimately truth would out. That to me is kind of a flip side of Roswell. Now, I often say in forums like this that I don't do UFOs. And the answer is I really don't. I had a brief brush with ufology back when I was in the museums back in Springfield in the mid-'60s, and I came away with this awful taste in my mouth and the feeling that through that doorway one would never, ever learn the truth. Official documents, Air Force spin, CIA manipulations, all of that notwithstanding. So when the occasion presented itself some years later that I could begin to look on this imagery from NASA and ultimately other space agencies at what appeared to be ancient ruins in the solar system left by someone, I thought to myself, well, if they are spinning and controlling the sources of UFO information, what if we tried another doorway? What if we tried something like exoarchaeology? What if we tried to companion the data we see on the imagery with our understandings of archaeology based on mainstream studies on Earth for the last several hundred years? So that was what began first as our investigation into Mars, and then into what was on the moon, and now it's encompassing the entire solar system. And the major question I have as I was watching your excellent film, and I don't say that lightly, I really think you have done something that needs a very large audience, that will stand the test of time, that is up there at the highest level of professionalism. And I speak of someone who really is down on this kind of media, really down on it. What we need is to understand the context for the phenomenology currently going on. And what I have found, and what the next book, since everybody's plugging their books, I'll plug my next book, that follows on, monuments and dark mission. The next one I'm going to complete is going to try to put the UFO phenomenon in the context of a larger history, a hidden history of this solar system, which is not exactly natural. How many here are familiar with Michio Kaku's Type 1, Type 2, Type 3 civilizations? All right, how many know that he borrowed, and I'm using the term loosely, the term from a Russian astrophysicist named Kardashev, who was a grad student of a brilliant astrophysicist in Russia named Shklovsky, who edited a book with Sagan called Intelligent Life in the Universe, where he proposed that there were certain objects in the solar system, like the moons of Mars, Phobos and Deimos, that looked to him back in the late 50s, early 60s, as if they were not natural. Our data now says that Shklovsky was correct. In fact, most of the objects that NASA has visited, or ESA, or the Russians, turn out to either be unnatural, I'm talking the small objects, or modified by millions of years of some kind of extraordinary engineering fitting into what Kardashev called a Type 2 civilization. Our model is that the human species, Linda's Homo sapiens sapiens, is the great-great-great-great-great-great-grandchildren, with a few zeros left out, of whoever redesigned this system. And the next book, which is going to be called The Heritage of Mars, Remembering Forever, is going to detail the documentation that actually puts the science behind that idea. When I look at NASA going various places and not showing us the data, and not being honest with us regarding who is currently visiting and why, the remaining major thought I have is the reason they can't tell us is because somehow we have indeed been tinkered with, and we're not the pure descendants of the extraordinary people who created what we can see on these photographs all around us from here to beyond Pluto. And getting that data publicly revealed is not going to happen through the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal or Fox or CBS or NBC or MSNBC or any of the television broadcasts. To me, it's only going to come through persistent efforts like yours and the internet, and each and every one of us demanding through this most democratic of media ever created. I mean, we're our own editors, for God's sake. It's that medium that's ultimately going to push us over the tipping point, and I think that I see some kind of a game changer on the horizon, probably within the next couple of years. And when we have Q&A, if someone wants to know some of the evidence I'm looking at, I'll be happy to tell you.
Thank you, Richard. Yeah.